Good afternoon everybody, or welcome into my craft room. It feels like a really long time since we've done this, so I'm hoping I can remember how to do everything. It's Friday, it's the last Friday of February, and today is Stampin' Chat. So I'm going to be looking at clean and simple cards, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that is in a minute. First of all, I'm just going to check that I'm live where I think I'm live. Because, you know, you think you can press all the right buttons and you hope that you've done it all right, but sometimes you get caught out, or sometimes I get caught out anyway. So let me just find myself and make sure that I'm there. It looks like I am. Hooray. Okay. Right, so there we go. So if you're joining me live, that's fab. If you are watching on the replay, then you are equally welcome. And if you're over on YouTube watching the recording, then hello to you too. All right, just a few reminders first of all, and I've made some notes so I don't forget. Celebration is ending next week. There's less than a week to go. It ends on February the 29th. So if you've been keeping a little list maybe of things that you want, and you've been planning on ordering and getting some free things during celebration, then you only have until next Thursday to do so. If you've got any questions at all about celebration, then just let me know. Jackie, hello. I'm glad you got a notification, and I'm glad that you can hear me okay. That's a bonus to know. Thank you very much. Something that is a long way ahead, but is also actually not that far ahead. The annual catalogue and the mini catalogue, the spring and summer mini catalogue. Yes, spring and summer mini catalogue. It's spring really, isn't it? It used to be spring and summer. The spring mini catalogue and the annual catalogue are ending in a few months' time. However, the last chance list, in other words, the list of everything that is not going to carry over and still be available once the catalogues end, is being released on March the 18th, Monday the 18th in the evening. I will get it out to everybody who is on my customer list as soon as I can after that. However, the big thing about the end of an annual catalogue is that the in colours which are ending for that period of time always go really quickly. So we had the 2022 to 2024 in colours, which are Sweet Sorbet, Parakeet Party, Tahitian Tide, Starry Sky and Orchid Oasis. So those 5 colours will be leaving when we get the new catalogue. They won't be in there. If you've got an ink pad but you didn't get a re-inker, then you need to get one now. If you haven't got much card left, but it's a colour you really like, get your order for card in now. And the reason I say now is because when we get to March the 18th, which is only, 3 weeks away, not very long at all, those things will go out of stock really, really quickly. If you order them now, they are considered current stock, and if something goes out of stock in the next couple of weeks, fingers crossed we should get new stocks of them coming in. However, at the moment, when everything's in stock, order it now. So there we go, that's my public service announcement for today. Those 5 colours: Sweet Sorbet, Parakeet Party, Tahitian Tide, Starry Sky, Orchid Oasis. If you want anything in any of those colours, order it now. Don't wait until March the 18th. Likewise, if there is anything else that you absolutely love in either of the catalogues that you would be devastated if you couldn't have in your craft room, then order that at the same time as you order your colours. Because again, once we get to March the 18th, those items that are not going to carry over will be while stocks last only, and you never know how long anything is going to last. There may be some discounts on things then. We never know what discounts there will be until we see the list. So if you decide it might be worth waiting for a discount, that's the risk you take, but at least I've told you. And in case I forget to say at the end, the next Facebook live session is going to be on Friday, March the 22nd. It's normally the last Friday of the month, but the last Friday of March is Good Friday, so I won't be working then, and you will probably be doing other things as well to do with Easter. So just a reminder, I'll try and say that at the end as well, but I may forget. All right, so I'm just going to have some of my tea because I can already feel I've got a frog in my throat. Excuse me. Okay, so clean and simple cards, what are they? Well, I didn't really know. I sort of had an idea, but I thought, let's go to Google, because Google always has the answers. So I read quite a lot of things about clean and simple cards, and I pulled out the characteristics that everybody seems to agree on. And there are a few that are kind of, some say one thing, some say another. Clean and simple cards tend to have a lot of open space on the card, so lots of the card that is not covered with things, with stuff, with stamping, with layers, with embellishments. It's often called white space, although of course your card may not be white, but white space is the term that's used. So you're going to have lots of open or white space. You've probably got just one main image, instead of it being very cluttered with lots of images, lots of sentiments, lots of bits, just one. You've probably just got one layer, a single layer card. So basically your card base. You might have a layer on top of that. So let's say you've got a coloured card base, you might then have a white layer on there that you've stamped on, but that's pretty much going to be it. And there will be few or no embellishments. Some people are very strict, absolutely no embellishments. Other people say, oh, well, as long as you don't do too much and it's not two-dimensional, then it's still clean and simple. So whether or not you add rhinestones or whatever is up to you, but you're not going to find a lot of those kinds of things. Now, clean and simple cards are not my natural style. My natural style is lots of layers, lots of bits, lots of additions, quite dimensional. I don't always design those cards because, for a start, they cost a fortune to post. So for classes, I often design much simpler cards. However, they will still typically have several layers and 3D embellishments on them. So why might you want to do a clean and simple card? Well, you might want to do something different, so it's a bit of a personal challenge. Can I actually do something that's not what I normally do, that's maybe a little bit outside of my comfort zone? They tend to be quicker, although it has to be said that because it's not my natural style, I actually find them much harder to design, but they will be quicker to actually put together because you've just not got so much stuff going on them. They tend to be simple, so if you are a beginner card maker, if you are somebody that hasn't got much time to make a card today, then that can also be a plus. You don't need loads of stuff to actually make your clean and simple card with. You can actually make it with a single stamp set and a single ink pad if you want to. They can be extremely elegant. One of the ones I've got, which I will show you, I actually think is a really elegant card. And it's very, very simple. We talk about elegant simplicity, don't we? So if you're looking to do something very elegant, maybe for an anniversary or a wedding, possibly a clean and simple card is the answer. And I think they are particularly appropriate for sympathy cards, for masculine cards, and for thank you cards. Thank you cards don't have to be very, very fancy, although it's lovely if they are. Sympathy cards, it's much more about the message, isn't it? And masculine cards, some men, of course, I'm generalising, but some men love all the bits, some men don't. So if you're struggling to make masculine cards, maybe try something that's much simpler, much cleaner looking, and see if that works for you. All right, I'm going to put the camera down now, and I've got 4 cards to make today. Normally I only do 2 or 3, but I said that they were quicker to make, so that's an example of it. And I've also got some extra samples of each to show you. So bear with me, I'm just going to cover you over so I can fiddle around with the camera angle without making you feel ill. I need to remember to press the buttons. Let's see if I can still do that. And when I'm back, you'll be able to see my desktop. Okay, let me find the buttons to reverse the camera. I think it's that one, and turn it down so that you can see my desktop, and somewhere I've got some blue tack. I need to just fix down my grid paper as well, otherwise that will be going everywhere. Okay, so bear with me just while I get this right, and as always it'll take me a moment to sort out my cables. Right, so I'm just waiting for my, there we go, my iPad to catch up so that I can see. It's quite a lag today. Our internet has been dreadful through this terrible weather recently. The internet has not been good, so I'm hoping that it's not going to let me down today. All right, I'm just anchoring my grid paper with a little bit of blue tack. And let's see if I can hook this microphone cable up. The sun's been out today, which has been really, really nice for a change. The weather recently has been terrible. I haven't put any lights on. I might need to put some lights on in a minute, but we'll see how we go. So that shadow is purely from the natural light, but the natural light is so much better when you're crafting. So right, let's give it a go. So the first thing I'm going to do is do a little bit of stenciling using what Stampin' Up call a mask and I call a stencil. So whatever you call it, that's what I'm going to be using. Alright, so what have I got? I have a Very Vanilla card base. I've used the thick Very Vanilla for this because the standard weight is a bit flimsy. When you stand it up, it starts to kind of sag and fall down. So I've got the thick Very Vanilla. I have one of the Artistic Mix masks. And actually somewhere I've got a bit of paper where I've actually written down what I'm using. So if you're interested, there we go. You can see. So these are the Artistic Mix masks. There's a whole packet of lovely patterns here, and if you've been watching me for a while, you'll have seen me use these a lot. I've got a blending brush here. I've got one of the small ones because I'm not going to be stenciling a vast area. I'm going to use that with some crumb cake ink. Then for stamping, I've got Pecan Pie and Early Espresso. And the stamps I'm using the inked and tiled set. So I'm going to use this leaf here, and I'm going to use the Just a Note message there, which reminds me I haven't actually checked that I've put it on the block straight, so let me quickly do that. That's where the grid paper is brilliant, because I can line up my block with one of the lines and then see if that's stamping straight. Yeah, that looks pretty straight. Okay, so I'm going to put my mask on top of my card base. So remember, one or no layers. I'm actually going with no layers. I'm working straight on the card base. If you're nervous, you could cut a layer of card and work on that and then just glue it to the card base. And I'm going to pick up some ink from the ink pad, so I'm just brushing my brush over a few times. Some people go round and round like that. You can also do that. And I want a clear block. I'm just going to reach for an extra clear block just to blend my brush on. Here we go. Let's pop that cable out of the way. I had to move it so that I could just slide my chair. Okay. So I'm going to just blend the ink into the bristles of the brush on that block to help make sure I don't have any blobs, and then I always just kind of swipe it on my grid paper a little bit just to make sure I've got no big blobs of ink. So that's kind of a double check. So I've laid the stencil down straight, so it's straight on the top and the left hand edge with level with my card, and I'm just going to move my brush in the air and then lower it down until I make contact with the stencil. And I think I've just probably made a blob because I was being a bit ham-fisted and needed to use two hands for something, but we're not going to worry about that. So I haven't re-inked my brush. I really want quite a faint colour of ink on here. If you're worried about your stencil moving, you could anchor it to your tabletop or your grid paper using masking tape or washi tape. And I'm just going to hold it down firmly so nothing can move, and just pull up the corner just to have a little look and see if I've got as much coverage as I want. And yeah, that looks about right to me. So let me lift that up so you can see it a little bit closer. So that's given me a really subtle background So ignore the little blobby bit there. That's why I put my brush down, because I wasn't really focusing on what I was doing, but that's okay. It's a handmade card. So I've now got texture on my card without any dimension. So that's just completely flat. My stencil I can just rinse under the tap because it's a water-based ink and it will just wash straight off. And I'm now going to do just a little bit of stamping. So I've got this leaf which I really like. I think I'm probably going to stamp it that way up. So I'm going to use pecan pie for this. And I had in mind a more masculine card for this, although it would work for anybody. So I'm just using neutral colours, and I'm going to stamp that partly on the stenciled area and partly on the area I left blank. There we go. That's the leaf. I really like this leaf. It's as if you had painted a leaf and then printed it, but without all the mess. And then I'm just going to add some words using my darkest colour ink, which is Early Espresso. So I'm not sure where I want to put these words. I'm just going to, probably there, I think. But you know, you can kind of hold the stamp and think about where you want to put them. So I'm using my grid paper to make sure my card is straight. And I'm going to pop that there. And that is my card finished. So I actually think this is a very elegant card. It could be a sympathy card quite easily. It could be a thank you card. So there we are. Boom. Card number 1 done. So let me move that to one side. I'll clean my stamps while I show you another example, which is this one. So with this one I've gone with pinks. I've used Bubble Bath ink. I've used the colour and contour stamps and Berry Burst ink to stamp the flowers. I've used a mask from the 4 Square pack for my stenciling, and that little thank you there is also from Colour and Contour. Perhaps that's better at the bottom. There we are. So I'll leave you that to look at while I find my scrub and clean off my stamps. No questions so far. If you do have questions, please ask. It is fun actually to make a card that is so quick. It comes together really, really fast. My cards typically don't, so it is nice to do that. And actually I'm just going to add something inside. I think I want a little bit of that leaf inside. So having said I was finished, I'm not. Let's just add some of that leaf inside. There we are. And I think I'm going to keep this particular design in the back of my mind because I can see me using it again and again. And I probably would sit down and make a batch of half a dozen cards. If I'm making thank you cards, I often make a batch. And the same actually with sympathy cards. I hate making sympathy cards, of course. And if you lose someone or a friend loses somebody, then you don't necessarily feel like sitting down and making a card. So I've usually got some sympathy cards by me so that I can send one in a timely way without struggling when I'm not feeling like doing anything at all. So there we are. Card number 1. Put that aside, then I can show you that one at the end. Alright, so the next one is going to involve stamping again, but also some embossing. So can I hear you saying that you thought I said there were no layers in Clean and Simple cards? Well, yes, I did say that. However, I'm not going to add a layer to this. So this might be something that you've tried in the past and maybe haven't done for a while. That's what it was for me. or it might be something that you haven't actually thought of doing. Okay, so I'm using the Painted Lavender stamp set, which is one of my absolute favourites in the mini catalogue. I'm going to use the stem and the large lavender spike or flower head, and then this one works on its own, but it also makes a nice contrast when you over stamp that one. So I'm going to use those three. And for my words, I'm going to use the thank you from Pansy Patch. I mentioned that these make great thank you cards, and that's exactly what I'm going to make. I've just got a thick white card base here, and I'm also going to bring in my Simply Scored tool. Now you can do this with a ruler and a scoring tool or a bone folder, and if you're going to do that, I suggest that you lean on a foam mat, because that just gives you a little more squish under your work, and therefore your score lines will be better. But if you've got a Simply Scored or a scoring tool of some sort, this is absolutely perfect. This is simply a work surface with lines scored into it, or grooves, every 1/8 of an inch, and so I can pop my tool in, follow the groove down, and I'll get a beautifully straight scored line. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some scored lines to the front of my card. So I want the raised side to be on the front of my card, and I want the indented side therefore to be on the inside. So I'm going to work from the inside of my card, and I want them nearest the fold. So this is 4 inches wide, so I'm going to start doing them, I think, at 3 inches. So that's 1 inch in from the fold. And I'm going to use the narrow end of my scoring tool because I'm scoring card. If you're scoring something more fragile like paper, use the wider end and you're less likely to poke a hole in it. So I've done that at 3 inches, and then I'm just going to come 1/8 of an inch away from that, which is the next groove. And again. And again, I'll probably do 5 because an odd number is always good. There we are. So that's my scoring done. And I will show you what it looks like. So this is the front of my card. I'm hoping that the light will catch that so you can see those score lines. You tilt it a little bit. I think you can see them. White is never easy to see on, but there we go. So those are my score lines. So next I'm going to stamp. I'm going to do the stem last of all. I'm actually going to start with the detail. I'm going to layer these two images one on top of the other, and when I'm doing that I always find it's easiest to start my stamping with the darkest colour of ink, because then that's much easier to see through a stamp. So this is Gorgeous Grape. And I'm going to stamp that fairly near the top. There we are. Next I'm going to come in with Highland Heather, and I'm going to stamp my second flower image. And on this one there are a few little stem sections, and I'm going to line those up with the stem sections on the one underneath. So you may be getting the top of my head, for which my apologies. But you really need to be right above it to make sure that this is straight. Which I think that is, but they're quite forgiving stamps, so if they're not perfect, it won't matter. There we go, it's my two-tone flower. And then finally the stem. This may well go off the bottom, but that's fine. What I didn't want was to stamp the stem and find then it was too high up and my flowers were going off. So I tend to do the stem last of all. There we are. So that's my lavender. And then I'm just going to add some words in my darkest colour, which is Gorgeous Grape. Got my thank you, which again I haven't actually checked that it's straight, but because it's a see-through stamp I will be able to see where I'm stamping it. So there we go. So I've just stamped that across the stem. Now typically I would put a bow here, but because this is clean and simple I'm not doing that. So that is kind of visually is taking the place of the bow that I might have added on there. I'm glad you like the stenciled card, Jackie. Yes, dig yours out. I know, mine tend to sit there and then all of a sudden I'll remember I've got them, start using them, and then I can't put them down. So yes, definitely get them out. I'd love to see what you make if you do. All right, so that is my lavender thank you card, and actually once again, why not stamp on the inside? I don't know why I'm forgetting to do that. I think I've got simple drilled into my brain, but actually there's nothing to say I can't stamp on the inside of a simple card. So I'm just going to stamp the lavender again. Pop that on a foam mat. I can't remember if I used a foam mat before. I don't think I did, but I did have double thickness of card under me. This will work better, I think, with a little bit of extra softness. And then that stem last of all. I'm just going to bring this down to the bottom of my mat because I'm going to go off the edge. I ought to slide it under my grid paper, but you saw me blue tack that down, so that becomes a bit more of a mission then. There we are. Okay, now that's finished. Now I did do another sample. So on this one I've done the scoring in exactly the same way, but this time I've used the dragonfly from the Detailed Dogwood set, which is a Celebration set. I've used the same thank you, and I've used Lost Lagoon ink there and Pretty Peacock for the words, and hopefully again you can see that embossing. If you want to do a little bit more, you can emboss down and then you can emboss across as well, which will give you sort of an L shape. You could do it slightly further over and then you've got an area in which to stamp, or you could crisscross a frame. That would be really nice as well. So there are lots of possibilities just for a little bit of simple scoring. So again, I'm going to clean my stamps while you can look at those. Oops, let me pull back a little bit and then I'm not cleaning stamps while you're trying to look at the cards. It's so easy for me to put an arm or a hand across these inky stamps if I leave them without being cleaned. And experience has shown me that that ink is going to make its way onto my next project. So I try and clean as I go. Right, I'll move this lot out of the way. There we go. I'm just going to have some more tea. So Jackie says, it's simple and elegant, definitely with the scored lines. She likes to do this effect. Is someone texting or calling you? You're getting a Morse code noise every so often. No, they're not, Jackie. I've got everything turned onto silent mode, so I'm really sorry about that. And I haven't had any messages come up to say that they are. So I'm sorry if you're getting some sort of interference. I can't hear anything my end at all, and I can't see any evidence of it. So fingers crossed that sorts itself out. Can be really annoying, that sort of noise, I know. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is something that's a little bit more messy, not very messy, but just a little bit. Just nearly through everything on the floor. So this is going to be a 2-stage card. I'm first of all going to put down a little bit of watercolour wash, and because there isn't time to let that dry, I've got one I prepared earlier in best Blue Peter fashion, which I will actually use to finish my card, but I've got a piece of card here, so I'll show you the technique so you know how I did it. When I come to finish my card, I'm going to use this Night of Flight stamp set. This is a host stamp set from the annual catalogue, so you'll find it right at the back. So you can only purchase it if you place an order for £150, or if you gather together friends' orders, so you're placing a really big order total. However, I couldn't resist it, so I really love moths and butterflies, so I treated myself to that. I'm going to be using Memento Tuxedo black ink, just a plain black ink pad, and then I've also got my water painter here, and I'll be working on a note card rather than a card that I've made myself. So this is everything that I'll be using on the card that I'm going to demonstrate. I'm also going to need an ink refill, so I've chosen to use boho blue here, but you can use any colours you like. I'll be using different colours in a moment on the card, and I'm putting 1 drop of it onto a clear block. You could use anything. This is just going to work as a palette, so you could use a piece of a plastic bag. You might have a painting palette that you can use, but I've always got clear blocks on my desk, so that's a really quick and easy way of using a palette. Typically when I'm doing watercolour, I will use watercolour paper because the wet ink doesn't soak into it. It spreads really beautifully and it gives a gorgeous effect when it dries. However, for this kind of card, I didn't want to add the weight of and the look either, actually, of an extra layer. And watercolour paper is expensive. I mean, it's fantastic, but it's expensive, so I didn't want to fold a piece and make a whole card base out of it when most of it wasn't actually going to have wet ink on it. So instead I'm using a note card, so this is just some thick white card instead. And as long as you work fairly quickly and don't get everything absolutely sopping wet, it'll be okay. So that's just kind of a note about whatever substrate you're going to use. So I'm going to squeeze about 3 drops of of water from my water painter onto my ink. If you haven't come across water painters before, they have a paintbrush on one end and it unscrews in the middle, and the barrel is hollow and you can just fill it with tap water, and then you just squeeze it. It says push on there. You just squeeze it there to dispense the water. And it's a really easy way of doing painting, and they come in a set of 3. I'm hoping you can see this is actually a flat, quite a wide flat brush, so it's perfect for laying down my colour quickly. So all I'm going to do is just brush it over like that, and I always find it's much better not to overthink what I'm doing and where I'm putting it, but just to brush and do it. Get the job done. Otherwise you start to think about, do I need a bit more there? Is the colour consistent? Is that line too thick? Is it too thin? Have I got a gap? And actually it will all look fine once it's done, so don't overthink it. And I'm just going to pop my brush lid back on. There we go. You might have noticed I squeezed the barrel there. I squeezed some water through to flush the bristles through to get all the extra ink out onto my piece of kitchen paper, and then I'm just going to use that also to wipe off my clear block. Because these are water-based inks, they just wipe off with no mark left at all. Now that is starting to curl because it's not watercolour paper. However, if I just leave that to air dry, it will flatten itself back out and it will be fine. I don't want to work on that while that's wet, because if I'm adding a water-based ink on top for my stamped image, it will start to bleed into the damp card, which is obviously not going to be good. So I'm going to put that to one side, and here's one I prepared earlier. So this is my note card, And the note cards come with envelopes in the pack. So they measure, I can never remember this, 5 by 3.5 inches, the cards. And the envelopes fit them fine, but they are quite close fit. So if you're making something with note cards, they're super convenient and they're a really good size for, you know, little thank you notes and things like that. But don't put too much dimension on them. You can get away usually with a layer and a couple of rhinestones, but if you put any more on, they won't fit in the envelopes. However, with a clean and simple card, we're not going to be doing that, so that will be absolutely fine. So this is my watercolour wash. I used Balmy Blue and Asia Afternoon for this, and I let it dry. It took a couple of hours. In the summer it will dry very, very quickly, but this time of year, of course, it's not as warm. So I've got this image here, this moth, and my idea is that it's going to be kind of flying like that. So let me ink it. This is quite a big image, so I'm taking my ink pad to the stamp because it's not a large ink pad. And I'm also going to rest on a foam mat because it's a clear stamp. There we are. Now I could, if I wanted, take one of those water painters and some more ink and just intensify the colour on the wings or change the colour a little bit, but I'm not going to do that now. I'm just going to leave it like that. I think it looks quite nice with those blues coming through. And what I forgot to say when I was doing my watercolour was I used a drop of re-inker, which is perfect. However, and you've also got much more control over the colour because it's very concentrated. You can add loads of water or just a little bit of water and you get different shades of the same colour. However, if you've only got ink pads and you haven't got re-inkers, then what you can do instead, and the only one I can reach is grey, which is not very exciting, but anyway, you can just press your ink pad, your block onto your ink pad. Hopefully you can see that that's now got ink all over it, and then I could just use my wet brush on that. If you don't have a water painter, you can just use a wet paintbrush, but honestly, water painters are fantastic. They're so easy to clean. They're brilliant to travel with. I always take some art supplies with me when I go on holiday, and water painters are perfect because they don't leak and they're really easy to just refill while you're away. Right, so the last thing that needs is some words, and I'm going to use thank you again. This is the one from Pansy Patch that I used before, and I'm going to come up. For me, it looks right to have that quite close to that moth image, like that. There we are. So another quick design, clean and simple. Uses another technique, which is quite nice. Sometimes we learn these techniques and then we don't get around to using them. And then I've got a second one here that I made where I've used Daffodil Delight and Lemon Lime Twist ink. I've stamped the flower from Quiet Meadow, and this spatter is also from Quiet Meadow, and so is the Thinking of You message. So let me just try and get everything under the camera there for you. Jackie's saying maybe it's internet issues. That was the interference she was hearing. It might well be, Jackie, and I have no way of knowing if that's my end or your end, I'm afraid. I'm hoping it's not spoiling your enjoyment. Right, let's just clean those stamps again. I was once stamping in the summer. I was wearing a white t-shirt, which, you know, it's not the best clothing to wear if you're a messy crafter like me. And I put down an inky stamp which said happy birthday on my desk, and then I leaned right over to reach something at the back of my desk and leaned on my stamp, and then I got happy birthday all over my front. I seem to remember it was Night of Navy, but I could be wrong. Fortunately, because they're water-based stamps, the ink came out in the washing machine. But if you don't want to go around with stamping on your tummy, then make sure you clean your stamps. Okay, let's pop that one away. And one more project to go. drink some more tea. Ah, Jackie says it's fine. She wonders if somebody wanted me urgently. I don't think so, Jackie, but thank you for your concern. All right, so I'm going to work on a note card again this time. No, I'm not. The sample's on the note card. Sorry, I've got another example to show you which is on the note card. This is not a note card. This is a piece of thick basic white that I've cut to size. I was going to use a note card again, and then I decided to use a bigger stamp, and the note card wasn't large enough. So the stamps I'm going to use are this Lovely and Sweet set. This is in the mini catalogue. I've been doing such a lot with this suite the last week or so. And you'll see some of those popping up on my Facebook page very soon. But I do really like it. I think it's so interesting to have these botanicals. I like to do art journaling, also like to make books and things like that. And I know that these are going to be great for me using in all kinds of different projects. It's got some useful words in it. Congratulations and so sorry are not words that come up in every single sentiment set, but they're really handy to have. And just sending a bit of love your way is also a really nice one, I think, that will work for lots of occasions. Then it's got this lovely texture image in it. Let me lift that up so you can see that a little bit more clearly. And then 3 botanicals, which are the almond tree, so almond blossom and a couple of almonds, cocoa pods and vanilla. So they're really nice. And then this one here, which is just some kind of distressed vintage style type. It says Field, Lawn and Garden. A monthly journal of something or other. It's distressed, but it's really nice. I like that a lot. I was just using that yesterday. Okay, so what I'm going to do on this is I'm going to stamp an image, and then I'm going to use the texture stamp to add some detail and some visual texture to it without actually increasing the size of the card, and I may add a little bit of colour. So I'm going to stamp in basic grey, and I'm going to add that texture a shade lighter, smoky slate. And then I have some stamping blends here in case I decide I want to add just a little bit of colour. So I've got the light versions of Crumb Cake, Old Olive and Flirty Flamingo here. And because I'm using water-based ink for my stamping, I can use alcohol-based pens to colour in those images, and the outlines won't blur. So if you want to use something like Stampin' Right markers or watercolouring, then you want to stamp in a StazOn, a permanent ink that is alcohol or solvent based, and then colour it in with a water-based medium. So you kind of need one of each. You need to stamp in one and colour in the other. So you've got alcohol or solvent based, and then you've got water based. So you need to have one water based and one alcohol or solvent based, and that way they won't react with each other and you won't get blurry outlines. Alright, so I'm going to stamp first of all using basic grey ink. Oh, I've got a card somewhere with the details on. There we go, that's what I'm using. Hi Sandy, don't worry, you're not really late, it's fine, because you can always watch on the catch-up, watch on the replay or pick it up on YouTube, so you're not late as such, and it's lovely to have you here. Alright, so I'm using the Almond Blossom image, and I've got some words on this, but I don't think it really matters whether they're straight or not. I might try and get them straight, I think. There we are. It's quite a big image, this one. I always give it a good press, but it stamps beautifully. It's really clear. And then this is Smoky Slate, and I'm going to use this texture stamp. So I'm going to slightly overlap my stamping and then have some of it on the white space, and I'm just going to check it on my grid paper. Yeah, it is very pale. I wondered if I was going to need to stamp off, but I think it's going to be fine. So I definitely want some there, because there's a lot of white there. And this is, if I lift it up, it's a really funny shape, but that is actually fantastic if you're stamping around things, because you will always find that one of these areas is going to fit fairly well around your stamped outline. So you can turn it and have your texture extending out from your stamped outline. I don't mind if some of this overlaps, so I'm not paying too much attention to that, but it's worth just knowing. Let me just show you where I am so far. I don't know if it's, you probably can't see it otherwise. There we go. I think that you can see all that there. So it's just adding something in the background. It's not really colouring the images in, but it's just giving it a little bit of something, making it a bit more interesting. There, so I've done that 4 times, so I'm just going to do one more because odd numbers always look better than even numbers, but I'm not quite sure where I want to do it. Maybe down here. There we are. And it really makes me want to touch that. It's so textured, it's amazing. I'm going to pop some words on here before I do anything about colour, and I haven't got those out of the box, so let me just do that now. So I'm going to use this So Sorry stamp. I'm just going to check that straight on my block. Not quite. Let's just adjust that a fraction. Check it again. That's better. There we are. Now I think I'm just going to add a tiny bit of pink to the centre of this blossom. Not a lot. I don't want it to be really bright. I'm just following some of those stamped lines with the bullet point of this marker. Okay, so I'm going to do a bit in green as well, I think, actually, having done that. I'll lift this up and show you in a second. Just want it to be very subtle, just to take away the kind of greyness and the monochrome. So all I've done is gone down the central vein of the leaves with a kind of a, it's not exactly dotted, but just an intermittent line. And I've done the same on the stem, and I've added a tiny little bit to the centre of the flowers. I'm not sure that's even showing on the camera properly, so you might have to take my word for that. And then I'm going to use the crumb cake one, just again, just a little bit on the almonds. So I'm just using the lines that the stamp has created and just following those very lightly to add, it's really just a hint of colour, it's so little colour. So those almonds are just here. And then I'm going to come inside and stamp part of the image inside. There we are. So that is my completed card there. And then this one I did on a note card. So this uses the Cocoa Pod from the same stamp set. Again, I've used the textured image on there. So I stamped in early espresso the cocoa and also the words. And then this is crumb cake on there. So again, single layers, but they do look like they've got a little bit of texture on them thanks to that stamp. I'm glad you're going to catch up later, Sandy. That's always good to hear. Right, let me clean the last of these stamps. Can you believe we've been going for 50 minutes? Seems impossible. So I'll show you all the cards from today's session, and finally then I'll turn the camera up. Okay, so let's move those. Actually, let me turn my grid paper over so you're not looking at all that messy ink when you're trying to see the card designs. There we go, that'll be better. So clean and simple cards then. Lots of white space. Not lots of layers, so one layer or no layers, just your card base. A single focal point and few or no embellishments. I'm just going to see if I can get this one to lie down a little bit flatter. There we are. So this was the first one then. So I used one of the masks and an ink blending brush to partially stencil the background, and then I just did a little bit of simple stamping on it. With this one I used my Simply Scored to score some lines here and then stamped to one side of that. With this one I did a very simple watercolour wash and just stamped over the top of it once it was properly dry. And then last of all, some simple stamping using a texture stamp to add some extra interest, and just an absolute tiny hint of colour on this one. So Jackie's saying, how did I mark my alcohol lids? You mean here, Jackie? On the demonstrator website, a demonstrator put a link to a file where she had printed these and I just punched them out, so you could have a look there. If you can't find it, let me know and I'll see if I can signpost you to it better. So I've just punched them out with a small round punch and attached them with a glue dot. So I have all my Stampin' Blend markers laid flat, because that's how you need to store them so the ends don't dry up, in the stamping storage, which is great. But I find it so much easier to see what's what with those little labels on the end. And if I replace one, I take the lid off the new marker and then I just stick the lid off the old marker on it, because that's already labelled. So hopefully that helps. So you're looking at the demonstrator planning place, Jackie. If you look in the files section there, I'm sure you'll find it. Sandy says they are so effective in their simplicity. She loves them. Thank you, Sandy. Very much not my normal style, but I must admit I have enjoyed doing these. All right, I'm just going to turn the camera up so I can say a proper bye-bye to you all. I can't believe almost an hour has gone so quickly today. All right, so hopefully, yes, I've managed to unreverse the camera and here I am the right way up. It's always a positive if I don't end up upside down after I've been crafting. So thank you so much for joining me. I don't know what I'm going to be doing in March yet, but I will pop it in my customer newsletter, and I totally forgot to do it this time, but I will do an event for my Facebook page. So apologies if you were looking for that. I just forgot. The next live then is going to be on Friday, March the 22nd. So not the last Friday, because that's Good Friday, but the 22nd. And I will really look forward to seeing you then. Whatever you're doing this weekend, I hope you have a really lovely one. I'm going to be very busy tomorrow and very tired by the end of it, because we're moving our daughter and her fiance into their first home. It's very exciting. It took an awfully long time for them to actually get the purchase to go through, but it happened in the end. They have a lovely house. And yes, my husband's borrowed a van, so we are moving them tomorrow, along with, fortunately, some extra helpers. So it's going to be a very busy day, but very exciting as well. So whatever you're doing, have fun, and I'll see you again in a month. If you've got any questions, just let me know. Thank you so much. Bye bye.